Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbender, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited today to have as our guest Deborah Mitchell from Deborah Mitchell Media Associates. She is just a wonderful talent. We met, and we're going to go into that, by happenstance, but I don't believe in, in happenstance. There's no coincidence here in how we met. But just to give you a little bit of background, Debbie is an executive producer, content developer. She has like decades of experience working on, I don't even know how she manages with the nerves, on live TV productions. She's worked with CBS, ABC, on New York Fashion Week, Cannes Film Festival. She worked with the late great Regis filled in, with Regis and Kathie Lee the way back when. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful producer, content developer. She has her own business. She's called after by the Beard Foundation. She is on the board of Orlando's Global Peace Film Festival. How in the world do you do all this stuff, Debbie? It's just been great, to get to know you for the past couple of weeks. And again, there's no coincidence, right? In how we met.
That's true.
Yeah. Welcome
Oh,
to
thank
the
you
podcast.
so much, Sonny.
Yes.
I can't believe we've only known each other a few weeks.
Yes.
Seems like we've known each other for a long time.
Yes, it really has. And it's so funny because we live in the same community, very suburban community here in Central Florida, in Orlando. Just like a couple of streets from each other. And I don't even know I think it was someone on our Facebook page for the HOA, right? Yeah.
Yep. It was on our Facebook page. Someone put up a query and you responded, and I was scrolling through and I saw your name and what you did. And I thought, oh, so I went to LinkedIn and I looked at you on LinkedIn and I wrote you a note and I said, we live in the same community.
Exactly.
Let's connect. And that's how it happened.
And that's how it happened. And then there are a lot of similarities in terms of working the media circuit, in New York City for a hot minute. You in obviously TV and live productions, and me in the publishing world. So it's really weird how, it's a miracle we didn't bump into each other near Rockefeller Center and Midtown Manhattan, during our stint over there. Yeah.
It was nice to connect with a New Yorker. I've been here, this is my third year. And so when you said you were from New York, I was so excited. I was like, well,
and then we speak similar language too, right?
Exactly.
It's just been such a joy, and exciting to, have like these deep conversations and, not only about media, obviously, but also about social justice. Like we've been at it, right? We've been communicating regularly since we found each other on a suburban, HOA, like boring.
Social media. We can do social media. See the benefits of social media.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you spotted me, and that, and so the rest is history. But I wanted to invite you because in these conversations, and then I saw one of your live productions, regarding the culinary world and like awards and stuff. And it was just so much fun and it seems so seamless, and I think that a lot of people have been challenged with pivoting to live, creating live content and also newsworthy because there's so much saturation. So, trying to figure out what will really appeal, to different outlets or to different audiences. And I'm like, you know what? Debbie, can you come on and help us navigate, different media platforms and also different possible audiences, so that way we can all learn from, your decades of experience doing this, and try to implement that in how we present ourselves. I know that the overarching topic for this podcast is developing the right content, but that your tagline for your company is sharing your message with the world. And so, how did you land where you are now? Tell me a little bit about your background and your likes, dislikes, and all of that.
Well, I have been very fortunate because I've built a career in television. I mean, I started before I finished college. I was working in television. As you mentioned earlier, I actually interned with Regis his passing this weekend was just it brought up so many emotions and memories, and I reconnected with some of the producers who I worked with back then. But I really fell in love with television in New York, working for a local show, and that was basically the start of everything. And so, TV is it's a tough business, but it can be a very rewarding business. And what you're doing is storytelling. You're sharing information. You're giving your audience, the public, valuable information that they need. So I just love the idea of being able to do that. I actually worked with Essence Magazine. They had a TV show back in the 80s, and it was a weekend show. So I worked on that and created great content that was specific to the African-American community. Obviously, we welcomed anyone who would watch, but the topics and the stories that we were telling were related to African-Americans. So that was really fulfilling. And then I went on to work in daytime talk, and I worked for Geraldo. So I was with Geraldo Rivera for 11 years. And
wow.
Then daytime talk, there were hundreds, I won't say hundreds, but there were so many talk shows on. Geraldo, Maury, Sally. There were at least 26 shows on during the time that I was there. And I did most of my training with Geraldo. So it was really just an amazing time to be in television. Anything could happen. They were open to different stories. We got a lot of slack. People either loved him or hated him, but we had a good time with it. And I learned a lot. From it. And then I moved into news. I went to work for CBS News, CBS Network, national news. And I worked on the early show, which was, now it's called This Morning, and it features Gayle King. And so we were there. I was there when it was the early show from 2000 to 2010. So our competitors were the Today Show, Good Morning America. So it was that morning entertainment news programming. And one of the lessons that I learned in working with all these shows is that you need to know your audience. Who is watching you? Who do you want your message to get to? What is the message that you want to tell? So no matter what you're doing, whether it's on TV, on social media, you need to know what message and who your audience is for your specific platform. And that's really,
yeah. And that's the thing, because sometimes we're caught up with, what we like, because it's easy.
Yeah.
But really, having your fingers on the pulse of your viewers or your listeners or your readers, whatever the media outlet is, I guess is, numero uno, the first thing you always have to keep in mind.
And that's what I asked her. I said, who's your audience? I always ask that. Who's the audience? You have to know the room that you're playing to.
Yes, totally. So that's the first takeaway, people. Know your audience. So again, with all of this saturation, and especially now that we're like stuck at home, and so we have all of these options in terms of to tap into, whether it's home remodeling or news. But what do media outlets, we're talking about like live currents, like the most current trends and all of that, how do media outlets determine what stories they want to cover? Is that like a checklist, or like do they go by what's going on, or what does that that
it's
process
a combination.
like?
So if you're talking about national news, it's a much broader audience that you're appealing to, and you're looking at topics that are broader. if you're talking local news, it's more local and topics that are important to the area that you're in. But how it works is that we all producers sit down, we read as much information as we can in different types of newspapers, and then we sit down as a group and we decide, and the executive producer has the final say. We'll say, okay, we'll go with that story. We'll go with that story. But we all are responsible for pitching stories that we feel will somehow resonate with the audience that we're watching. So if it's a news story, we're talking COVID, coronavirus, you need to know the latest. And that is, news is like a machine. It is constantly, you have to give the most recent, the most current, the most updated information. So you know that coronavirus, that story is going to be in the news for a while. So you're definitely going to cover that. And then, as you go along, there are the protests that are going on. That's in the news. So you're reading a lot of different information that helps you to decide what's going to be the featured story, how the virus is affecting the community. You're thinking. You have to think of the days and the weeks as a calendar. So right now we're in the summer months. So how are people dealing with the virus in the summer months? How are parents preparing for school in the fall? So you're constantly kind of thinking a few steps ahead, but it's always how we can get to people in the moment. So that's what you're trying to focus on.
And so again, so now these are like the current events that are impacting, our daily lives. So
exactly.
you can't do anything right now without taking into consideration COVID, right?
Yes.
And what's going out there on socially out there, right? Those are two big things, that are happening. And so to try to pitch something different, what are they looking for? What would they say? Oh, let's stop and maybe consider something other than COVID and social.
Good question. Yeah. Because TV, people, no matter what, people love television. And to get my clients who come to me who want to be placed on TV, I have a very serious conversation with them. I said, okay, first of all, tell me what you're pitching. Why do you think it's important? So first of all, know the message that you're trying to put out there. TV shows are always looking for experts. So if you're an expert in a field, you've written a book, or you've written articles, or you're talking about something that's pertinent to what's happening in the news right now, there's a greater chance of you getting on television.
Right.
But if you're going to talk about something that has nothing to do with what's happening, then they're not going to be interested.
Yeah. So it could be like an ancillary topic related to. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. If it's an ancillary topic related to. So if you're an expert, that's great. Or if you are, say, for instance, you're working with, I'm thinking local stories now, you're working with a food pantry that's helping people, and you've helped, say, for instance, 5,000 families, and that's a big number. So that's something that a producer might stop and say, wow, that's a lot of people that are in need of help. So let's maybe look at that food pantry and see. So there's always a little nugget or a little bit of information that might stand out that makes the story just a little bit more interesting. And a producer might say, let's just do a little follow-up and see what's there and see what we could find.
Okay, cool. And then from a national standpoint, though, that's harder. That's harder to penetrate and to really. So are people like you like the conduit, or do they seek out? Like, do you get calls and say, hey, what's going on?
Oh, my God.
Okay.
We are inundated. We're inundated with calls. We're inundated with emails. There's just so much. And so, one of the great things about building a career in the city, I do know a lot of people, and I know a lot of producers, and so it's nice to have those personal relationships, because if they trust me. So if I'm going to call them with a pitch, they know, okay, she knows what a good pitch is. So that's really nice. So we do get inundated, and it helps when a pitch makes sense. People sometimes just write to us or send us vague stories, and we're moving fast.
Yeah.
We are zooming.
Yeah.
You know, it's helpful if the pitch has a beginning, a middle, talking points of what you want to talk about on the segment, an end as far as how you're going to wrap it up,
Yeah.
and the tips that you're going to give viewers, news they can use. People like news they can use, information they can walk away with and say, oh, okay, I either learned something or this is something that I could implement in my life moving forward.
So you would say those are the characteristics then of a good pitch. So it's like useful tips or practical insights, that it's short, that it tells us like, well, the storytelling part, which is what you always, you know, push. That's part of that's like your tagline, if we could call it that, you know, about sharing your message with the world. It's about creating that short story, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming this applies for, it could be for even not only individuals, but we're talking about nonprofit organizations, companies, government agencies. It doesn't matter if you're the private or public sector, or even if you're a movement, to be able to articulate that story in this way. Oh, okay. That's
and the tricky part is, most news segments, national news segments, if you look at you probably don't even realize it, they're about 3 minutes, 30 seconds or 4 minutes. So you need to be able to tell this story in that amount of time. You know, locally, you might get a segment that's a little longer. It might be 5 minutes, 6 minutes, which really isn't a lot of time, but it's much more than 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So you need to be able to tell that story in that amount of time.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. So there's like a timing to it, you see?
Okay,
good.
And if you have a good producer getting you ready for the segment, the producer will help you craft that message so that you are able to tell it in that amount of time.
Right.
And you feel like, okay, you did a good job. You got your points out. And
and it doesn't have to be necessarily, you know, like selling something. It's more about bringing value.
Value.
Yeah.
It's a conversation. You don't want to go on a show and we call it plugging. Mentioning a company's name or a book's title, or that's not what you're there to do. You're there to have a conversation. Have a very calm, relaxed, informative conversation.
Right.
And hopefully your interviewer is doing their job, and they mention the association, the book, the project that you're involved with, so that you don't have to worry about that, because you're really there just to inform.
Right. And coming on as a subject matter expertise, right? To really, So good. So this gives us some framework, you know, to know, you know, the do's and don'ts, you know, so don't go on a rant like I sometimes do.
But you're enjoying yourself.
Really? Yeah. I mean, you know, reel it back in. Yeah.
But you bring up a good point, because when it comes to TV, you have a set amount of minutes that you have to get out before the commercial comes in. But when you're running something like a podcast or social media, you're on your Facebook page, you don't have the same type of restrictions. Now, you can talk, you can be yourself, you can relax, you can talk a little bit more. You don't have to be out in a 3:30. It's not a hard 3:30. That's hard.
Yeah.
So you can have more fun with it. You can relax with it a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I admire live, all of these people that go on live. I don't know. I know Chris, and I know he's listening. He's behind the scenes right now recording this. It's like he's been trying to push us to go live, and I'm just like, I think it's going to give me hives, like in the middle of it. I feel like, you want me to get hives or pimples? Like, I haven't had acne since I was a teenager. He wants me to like break out and have like a conniption.
You know, I think you would relax into it and you'd be fine.
Because I marvel when I see these live shows, like these news shows, on how they end it. Like, how do you know? And I know that they're being fed stuff through how annoying is that though? Like, or do they get used to it? Like, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Some people get used to it, and then you have your stage manager giving you cues over, you know, in the corner. He's counting you down and telling you how many minutes you have.
Oh my
God!
So
you're aware. It's a lot to juggle. and then you're listening to the guest, but it's you relax into it. You relax into it.
Yeah. If you're in that environment, I'm like, it's like the adrenaline alone.
Exactly. You're running on adrenaline.
It's like a drug. I can imagine it's so exhilarating and just like freaking crazy. So you mentioned before though about the switch now to social media and how that offers some flexibility and also versatility, right? Like you're not as restricted. So how can these virtual platforms be used to create and deliver original content to audiences?
I love social media. I have to tell you, it could be good. It could be used for good or it could be used for bad. But I think it could be to do so much good because the walls are down as far as people having to rely on, say, for instance, television. You actually have your own personal platform where you can put your message out. And like television, each platform has a different audience. So you need to know your audience. And I'm hoping that by now, a lot of companies, they all have different platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Every company should have that. And each of those platforms have a different audience. And clients will ask me, well, how do I know who my audience is? And I will tell them, I'll say, okay, with Facebook, the audience there are people you already know. It's usually when you accept a Facebook friend, it's somebody you probably know.
Yeah.
So when I say LinkedIn, usually used for professional reasons. So it's the people you want to know. And then Twitter, people you don't even know, but they could be following you on your Twitter account. You're following them. So those are people you want to know. So that's the way you kind of know your audience. And if you're pushing out your own content or you're retweeting somebody else's content and you tag that particular person, they might see it. You never know. So, it's a good way for you to reach someone who you might never have an opportunity to connect with. Instagram, I love Instagram because it's storytelling in a photographic way.
Yeah, very visual.
Very, very visual. Yeah. So I love Instagram for that. But know your audience.
Yeah.
Use that audience to build a community.
Yeah.
So whether you're a company, a brand, use that particular audience to communicate with them, engage with them, and let them know that you're listening to them, respond to them. It's not something that you set up the platforms and just leave them alone.
Yeah.
You have to actually engage.
Yeah.
So,
but I think that's the hardest part for a lot of them, right? A lot of companies, and I speak for myself too. When we started, now we kind of have it like on cruise control, but we also tell our clients, if you're not going to have a dedicated initiative, then just stick to what you can handle. And then once you can, grow your bandwidth, then incorporate other stuff, when you can adapt what you're putting out to the different audiences. But it's not easy to have a consistent presence because developing good and original content that's entertaining and valuable at the same time is not easy, is it?
No. And don't feel the pressure to be on every single platform. Choose one or two and then focus on those one or two.
Yeah.
Build out a calendar. A calendar is so important. A calendar where you decide what message you're going to put out on what platform on what day every single week. People like a TV audience, they want consistency. They want to know that when they turn on the channel at 6 o'clock, they're going to read whatever. So they know your podcast is going to drop on whatever day or whatever time. They like consistency. So you create a calendar where you have consistent information that comes out, maybe 3 times a week. But people know that they're going to see it. And you take the time, whether it's an hour out of your week, to respond to people who write to you. That's so important. So people feel as though they're being heard. So that's important.
Totally. I feel like Twitter, for example, I haven't really like been on Twitter too much. I've been like dabbling into it lately, just
Mhm.
because now we're all stuck, so we have more
Yeah.
time,
Mhm.
but I feel like connecting through Twitter,
Mhm.
there's just so much. Like those feeds are like people and
Yeah.
people and people. So I almost feel like it's about alignment. I don't know.
Mhm.
Am I wrong? More about alignment or like getting a sense of what people are thinking in, in
You
general than it is really about like in-depth relationship building and I don't know, or like
you can build
conversation.
relationships because you can create a hashtag that is your
Mhm.
hashtag, and then your community will use that hashtag, and you can keep up with your community. So you can build community on
Okay.
Twitter. Yes, it moves very quickly, and
Yeah.
every minute I don't even know how many tweets are going out. But
Yeah.
if you have a hashtag that is dedicated to your brand,
Mhm.
you can check in with that hashtag and see who the people are who are following you, commenting to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why
Uh,
hashtags are important to organize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
organize
And
your
to stick
thoughts.
to those like one or two hashtags, not really deviate too much from that too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
We've been doing that a lot more also,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
stay focused with that to
Mhm.
create some kind of critical mass. Something that's really dear to both of us, is diversity and inclusion. We've talked
Yeah.
about this. And so, what are the best approaches in your experience to incorporate DNI or DENI? Right when creating original content, so making sure that it's balanced, that that diverse voices are included, and that again, that it's equitable access. How do you
Just
navigate that?
just exactly what you said. The person producing the content needs to think of those things that you just said. You
Hmm.
know, um, realize that the audience is just not monolithic. It's a mix.
Hmm.
So you have
Hmm.
to make sure that you are thinking about those other cultures, those other um, individuals who may be, or who you might want to attract to your product. You have
Hmm.
to, and do your research, do your homework.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about doing your homework. I
Yeah.
mean, when I used to go out to shoot stories and I was booking a guest, I was always thinking of how I can make the guest as diverse as possible.
Hmm.
I had to find a black guest, a Spanish guest. So that's just
Yeah.
who I was as
Hmm.
a producer. I
Yeah.
am as a producer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the person who's in control, who's putting
Hmm.
the content together, needs
Yeah.
to, or who's supervising it, needs to make sure that that's being addressed when the content is being put together.
Do you feel that in recent years there's more of an intentional approach in trying to incorporate diverse, like for example, Joy Reid, one of my faves,
Yes.
just recently got her prime time slot,
Mhm.
and I think watching cable news, she's been one of the few or
Mhm.
that really, I mean, she invites everybody on her show. I just love it,
Yes.
because you
Mhm. It's a
really
nice mix.
see, yes, a very, very nice, robust mix of people, male,
Mhm.
female, with different gender identities, just the all kinds of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. It's just
Mhm.
fantastic. But do you see us finally, going in that trend? Or, I mean, what are some of the challenges that you've seen throughout the years to get to more inclusion and diversity in media, especially
Well,
TV?
I'm
Hmm.
I'm glad. I'm very happy for Joy, and I feel that this year, this what is happening now in 2020 is pivotal. I mean, it's
Hmm.
different. I feel from before. I've been in the business 30 years, and I'm sorry to say that there's still situations where shows will have one African American producer
Hmm.
out of a staff of
Yeah.
many, many, and you
Yeah.
just have one. That's
Yeah.
not acceptable. So
Hmm.
that still bothers bothers me. And, I hoped it would be different over the years as I grew in the industry, but I still saw that.
Yeah.
And every few years you'd have, complaints and boycotts and networks saying they're going to do better, and they would put someone in a position, a diversity, give them a title of a diversity specialist. But they didn't really have the power to make the change, and they weren't making the changes. So that was disappointing because it was just a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem. But I feel that this year is different. It just feels like George Floyd has really, and people being locked in the house and forced to look at television and absorb what is happening. Yeah, it's forced people to think about things a little bit more. We're not moving as fast. You have to really sit and think. And I feel that change is definitely going to be different.
Yeah, I really hope so too. It's and you're right. I almost feel like it's like a big pause button, right? Like this whole thing has been a humongous pause button, and now we're faced with time to connect the dots. And I'm like, I'm not reflected as often on TV. Oh yeah, like all of this programming, Netflix shows, and I mean, you're now we're looking at the full gamut, right? So then you start noticing these things. I mean, if you have somewhat of a brain, right? You start connecting these dots and realize that there's no balance here. It's not. And so then, what do you suggest? People that want to work in communications and want to get into media that are people of color, to what steps to take or what to do to find those allies or, a pathway to decision making positions where they can make a difference. I know that you went independently, so you've got all the control. I know, and I'm sure it feels.
I know, there's the upside and the downside, but there are so many organizations that exist, whether it's national organizations through the media or Facebook groups for people of color who want to get into business. And what's happening now is that networks and production companies, they're looking now. They are, I'm getting calls all the time. Debbie, who should I, what should I do? What should I talk to? Who should I talk to? Yeah. Like, Google it. Google, or, I'll give them some leads, but it's there. So they're actually looking now. And I'll actually, when I'm talking to corporations or companies now, I'll actually say, well, I know that you're following everything in the news, and you're probably looking to diversify and be more inclusive in your hiring. Because it may not be on top of mind for them in the moment. And one thing you'll see about news is that it's very cyclical. A story will be in the news for a while, and then it'll just fade away. Yeah. And you're like, hey, what happened to that story? Yeah. It's just not top of mind. And I was worried that that's what was going to happen with this, with the protests and social justice. I just thought, oh my God, it's going to go away just like it's done in the past. But this one is hanging on. Yeah. It's in the
news. Because there are more people vested. Yes, and there are more people, more diverse people, vested. White America is finally, vested in, in the process of change. And so, and it's wonderful, and I think it's really way overdue. And
way overdue. Yeah. And I was going to say, the walls are down as far as waiting for other people to make things happen for us. You were asking about people who want to get in the business. Yeah. You have these platforms now. Create your content. Yeah. Create your content. Yeah. Whether it's through going on YouTube, Facebook, create your content, because what's happening now is that when producers are looking for stories, they're no longer waiting for publicists to pitch them the stories. They're actually out on the site looking on the different platforms how to find new talent. They're looking at what's trending, who's trending. So create your content and put it out there, and someone will
find you. It's almost like dating. It's like finding your match. It's like, oh, he's gonna find me or she's gonna find me.
You just have to be out there.
You gotta be put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's okay to approach and look and ask them for work, but also still put your content out there.
Yeah, without expectation, just being yourself, right? And authenticity.
Exactly.
You mentioned YouTube, and that I was fascinated at your live production for the beer bout. I was like, holy cow. She's talking to this chef in freaking Australia, and she's got this. So I was like completely amazed. And then you were integrating video footage into, I'm like, how in the world? And so when we talked after, I'm like, I was so impressed. You're like, oh, it's like a whole posse, like a whole crew behind the scenes. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, good to know, because you made it seem so easy. And I was like freaking out for you.
My posse is small but mighty. We are really, I mean, we're like people who've been doing it. And so, and you know, the prep work, the pre-production. So, you know, when you talk about virtual events, that's what, it's so interesting to pivot now, because people can't do in-person events. So we have to figure out how to make it happen. So, virtually. And it's a couple of moving parts. It's not so easy. So it's nice when people come to you and I and ask us how they can make it happen, and you know what it takes, because it does take a little bit. And so, you know, we have pre-production where we have to figure out, you know, who the guests are, what the elements are, what we want video, how much time it's going to take. So, and we rehearse, you practice. So it does take time. And, you know, for those of us who are thinking about doing it at home, like setting up a virtual studio at home, or even just doing a Zoom or a webinar, there's certain things that you need to have in place. Your audio has to be good. People will put up with bad video, but they won't put up with bad audio.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's another takeaway. Okay.
So your audio and your lighting. You know, you help me out with my lighting, because I was So you have to get lighting, whether it's natural lighting or you buy a light ring and you know, you work on it. But you don't just come on air cold. You have to practice. You have to rehearse. And so we had rehearsal. So it seemed seamless. Great. That's fabulous.
That means you did your job well. Exactly. Right. Well. It's so funny because we're working on a production that was supposed to be live, like on stage with a group of women. And so we're like, okay, pivot. What are we going to do? Right. I told you a little bit about that. And so this past week, some of them don't have a green screen. Some didn't have the lighting. So I just purchased and deployed. So everybody had all their stuff. And Chris, our producer, you know, the one that had given me like what to buy, you know, for them to be able to set up like a basic studio. And then it's really not that comprehensive, you know. So this is, it just takes, you know, it's like the joke said, how do you get, when the tourist went pulled over the cab driver and says, hey, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And he says, practice.
Exactly. and every practice you learn something new. You know, you figure out a problem comes up and you figure it out, and you're like, okay, we got that taken care of. So
exactly, totally. Now talking about live, because you've done it all, right? So
I really have done a lot.
Oh my God, it's like thousands and thousands of hours of production, you know. So my question to you is, like, basic pros and cons of live versus, you know, versus pre-recorded, aside from the highs.
Okay, you have to include the highs, because So live. Okay, so usually live you can reach. You're getting that live interaction with the people who are watching, and there's really nothing like that. I mean, whether you're talking to them or they're texting you or emailing you while you're on air. That's pretty cool. Let's see, pre-production. Pre-recordings, you have a little bit more control. So going back to, if you do it live and you make a mistake, if you're embarrassed easily and you get flustered, then you run the risk of that. But if
Yeah.
it's pre-recording, you can stop and do the take as many times as you want. So it's a little
Right.
bit more. It can be more polished in the presentation,
Yeah.
just because you
Yeah.
have more control.
Right.
So, but live is really just riskier. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of cool. Pre-recorded, you could put, more bells and whistles. You can add music. You can put,
Yeah.
cute little lower thirds. But I was able to do that, and we did it live. So you can
I
do
saw,
it live.
yes. I was like, what is going on? Yeah. That
And
is
a
great.
couple of people afterwards said, "Wow, you didn't even flinch when the video froze." I said, "What am I going to do? I just kept
Right.
going." So you got to get a little bit more prepared with live.
Yes.
Because anything
Yeah.
can happen. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you as
So
a
it's
host
like-
or moderator.
Yeah. And it seemed, and that's why it was seamless, because it seemed like you had a backup,
Mm-hmm.
and you just went, okay, this happened, so this is the backup. And then you only had to do that like maybe twice, but I'm sure you also had a backup to the backup,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, because I know you enough already. I know it's only been a couple of weeks. And I'm like, nah, she's not even sweating. I was like, wow. Anyway, it was just great. So,
Oh,
I mean,
thank
we've
you.
covered a lot of ground,
Yes.
and so, just to like wrap this up with a big fat red bow, or
Mhm.
gold bow, or whatever color bow people, would prefer, what would you say are the top, or like the most critical elements, roles, skills, even like skill sets, that someone might need to set up and put out a quality production? You already mentioned sound, but like,
Yep, I mentioned
like,
sound. I
yeah.
think sound, lighting, important. Your background. It's you want to have a pleasing background, something that's not too distracting. Because
Mhm.
people pay attention to everything. Right?
Yeah.
And finally, content. Your
Yeah.
content. People are listening to what you're saying. So if you have if you're going to say something, have something to say. That's what.
Bravo! 3 minutes, 30 seconds to the right. This was so much fun, Debbie. I can't even, and that in the last 3 weeks, it's been like, oh my God, I've been like trying to figure out, I'm like, how am I going to work with this woman? Like, we need to fight. And I know it's going to happen. It's going to unveil itself, at some point. But oh my God, I mean, just every time I get to talk with you, I learn something new.
Fun.
We have so much fun. Laughter is so great, because when you're living Groundhog's Day, it could get a little bit like funky and depressing, But I mean, thank you so much.
This was a pleasure.
Oh my God, this was so much fun. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us. We'll have Debbie back again at some point, because I know she's cooking up a lot of projects, and so any questions, just reach out to us. And thank you again, Debbie, for joining us today. Okay.
All right. See you around the neighborhood. All right.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Bye.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.